episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 423, Fear Factor Phony. The episode begins with the moon shining brightly in the sky, being the only source of light in the dead of night, while Ash and the gang were making their way through a forest, trying to get to the battle arena. Unfortunately, though, they were lost and wondering where they should go next, standing in the middle of the forest. Max checks his Pokédev, and unfortunately reveals that the nearest Pokemon Center was still quite far away. Brock encouraged the rest of the gang to at least go further on into the woods so that they could find a place to camp out for the night, saying that staying up in the middle of a dark forest was probably a bad idea, and Ash agreed with this. And just then, as Ash and Brock looked at the moon, they saw clouds start to cover the moon. Storm clouds, implying that a storm was fast approaching, so this just made Brock even more determined for everyone to find shelter. Just then, Pikachu's ears started to twitch, implying that it could hear something or sense something, and it suddenly rushed off to the source of whatever it could sense. Ash called out to Pikachu to come back, but Pikachu was far too determined to get to the source, so it just ignored Ash. Ash suggested that they run after Pikachu before it got too far, and May was initially hesitant, being scared to run around in the dark, but after some convincing from Ash, she admitted that going after Pikachu was a good idea, so they followed after Pikachu for some time, and eventually came across what appeared to be a deserted town. Ash quickly retrieves Pikachu, and they observe the abandoned town, seeing signs hang off their hinges, and basically just a ruined wreck, with Brock stating that the town appeared to be a ghost town, which instantly caused May to scream in horror, as she didn't understand the term ghost town and thought there were actually ghosts in the town, although Max just explained to his dumb sister that ghost town just meant that the town was deserted, and May gets a little embarrassed at the fact that she got scared about that. Per Brock's suggestion, Ash and the gang go to explore the abandoned town, hoping that maybe there'd be some shelter there, for the night at least, although May was still looking around, a bit worried that there could be something lurking in the darkness that was scary. Eventually, after some walking, when even Ash, Max, and Brock got a little intimidated by the lack of any people, they all came across what appeared to be the entrance to an abandoned mine. Brock looked inside the mine from outside, and even though he couldn't see much due to how dark it was, he declared that this would be a perfect spot to hide out from the incoming storm. Just as Ash and the gang were about to enter the mine, though, a pair of purple eyes lit up the pitch-black darkness. And these purple eyes come closer and closer and closer to the gang, and this obviously made Ash, May, Max, and Brock want to look away, but they were also intrigued by whatever these purple eyes were, and looked forward as the eyes fully emerged from the darkness to reveal that the eyes were on a gigantic haunter. It was much scarier than your average haunter, though, and it looked bigger even. So Ash and the gang were very shocked and terrified by this huge ghost Pokemon, and ran off in pure shock and fear, kicking up dust in the process. Haunter didn't go after them, it simply watched them run away and then disappeared back into the mine. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were currently on a watchtower that overlooked the entire abandoned town, and they were extremely bored, having nothing to do, and they lost track of Ash and the gang, so they couldn't even plot anything. Just then, though, they saw Ash, May, Max, and Brock running and screaming away from the mine entrance. Even after seeing this, Team Rocket was still bored and also hungry as fuck, but eventually, Jessie gets curious as to what Ash and the gang could be running from, with Meowth adding that it was likely something inside the mine, if that's where they were running from, saying that maybe there was ghosts inside the mine. So Jessie pleads James and Meowth to come with her to go investigate, and they do, and eventually arrive at the entrance to the mine. Even as they looked deep into the mine from outside, they were still bored, since they saw absolutely fucking nothing, although they had a bit of hope that they would see something, so they had a little smirk on their face. Just then, the same purple eyes that scared Ash and the gang came out of the mine, immediately followed by its full body, revealing itself as a giant haunter again, and it started to go towards Team Rocket, as well as Boba Fett, who had popped out of his Pokeball. Team Rocket didn't look scared, though, or even that interested in Haunter. They were just smiling a little bit, relieved to have something to try and get rid of their boredom, even if it was just a ghost, which they figured must have been just a fake little illusion or prank put on by someone or something. But then the Haunter got really close to them and stopped right in front of their faces and stuck out its tongue and screamed at them, which made Team Rocket come to the conclusion that this was no prank and an actual ghost, so they ran away in terror, screaming, just as Ash and the gang had, kicking up dust in the process. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they decided to take cover from the incoming storm, as well as the Haunter, who they assumed may still be chasing after them, in one of the abandoned buildings, hoping that this would provide enough shelter for them. Suddenly, though, Ash heard Team Rocket scream, but no one else did. Ash tells the others about the fact that he heard Team Rocket scream, though, and this made everyone terrified, assuming that the Haunter must have been involved, and maybe it was coming over to this house now, so they asked Ash to look for them, since the rest of them, especially May and Max, were way too terrified to look for the Haunter or Team Rocket. So Ash, even though he himself was scared too, gritting his teeth, he looked outside the window to see if he could see anything, but he saw nothing, which made him relax, assuming that he had probably just thought that he heard something, and everything was alright. And just then, he saw that it had actually started to rain. And due to this rain, Brock suggested that they stay in the abandoned building for the night to take shelter from it, and Ash agreed, although Max questioned this, being too scared to stay inside this building for the night, but Ash said they would all be okay, so long as they stuck together. Meanwhile, back with Team Rocket, it was revealed that they had actually fainted while trying to run away from the mine in fear of the ghost, and actually hadn't gotten very far, and were still basically at the entrance of the mine. Jessie was the first one to wake up, and immediately noticed the mine, and remembered what had happened, coming to the conclusion that she and her teammates must have passed out from the shock of seeing the Haunter. She instantly wakes up James and Meowth while her voice was trembling as she told them that they had to get out of the area fast before the ghost came back. But as James and Meowth woke up Wobbuffet, Jessie felt the rain getting worse, so she reluctantly decided to instead go inside the mine along with the rest of her teammates to wait out the storm. Although James didn't want to get wet though, he did complain that they had to stay in the mine and to wait out the storm while a ghost could come at them at any moment. Jessie tries to convince herself and Meowth and James that the ghost wasn't actually real, as she laughs and states that it was probably just a hallucination induced by how hungry Team Rocket was. And James and Meowth choose to agree, not wanting to believe in the existence of an actual ghost. Just then, though, Wobbuffet suddenly screams its name, just finally realizing that they were still in the mine, because, it was slow and shit like that. And this scream startled Jessie, which made her realize that she was still on edge. So she suggested that she and the rest of her teammates dance to shake away any remaining fear that they had and feel better. So Jessie, James, and Meowth, and Wobbuffet all started to dance as well as sing about not being afraid of ghosts and started to feel better about everything. Wobbuffet was especially dancing around, and when it turned around while dancing, it was the first one to notice that there was a sound echoing from deep in the mine, and Wobbuffet was also the first one to see the source of the sound appear, being the same haunter from earlier. And Wobbuffet alerts James, Jessie, and Meowth to this, and they are all terrified, screaming in fear. Wobbuffet ran out of the mine by himself as well, because Jessie, James, and Meowth were actually so terrified that they couldn't even run, but Wobbuffet was able to run. Jessie and James and Meowth happened to fall over when they tried to run, and now they were at mercy to the haunter. So James quickly sent out his Cacnea, and Jessie sent out her Survivor in hopes that they could take out the ghost haunter. Survivor and Cacnea were as frightened as Team Rocket was, though, so they ended up just cowering in fear as well, with Cacnea even jumping onto James, prickling in the process. James, wanting to stop the pain from the hug, tells Cacnea to get off him and begs it to use Pin Missile. Cacnea obliges, but the Pin Missile has no effect, simply just going through the ghost haunter. This leads Jessie to order Survivor to use a Poison Tail on Haunter, but the Poison Tail just went right through Haunter as well, and smashed straight into the mine ceiling, causing some of it to crumble away. Now, with no other Pokemon to use, aside from James's Chimecho, Jessie screams at Meowth to do something instead. Although Meowth questions what he could even do in the first place, so Jessie grabs Meowth and throws him, reminding him that he was still a Pokemon, so he could attack once he was up close enough. Meowth understood this, and, terrified, he tries to use a Fury Swipes on Haunter, but the Fury Swipes, as well as Meowth himself, end up just going right through Haunter, as you would expect, and Meowth crashes into the electrical box on the remainder of the ceiling of the mine, which electrocuted Meowth, but also ended up activating the electricity in the mine, turning all the lights on, which finally got rid of the darkness. The lights being turned on caused the haunter to feel pain and tremble in fear as it covers its eyes before vanishing, leaving behind only a swirling cloud, which dissipates as well. It basically turned into a cloud and it was gone. Jessie, James, Seviper, Cacnea, and an electrified Meowth were all shocked at the fact that all it took was light to defeat the ghost, but they sighed in relief regardless, only to see a group of smaller ghost Pokemon, Ghastly, Haunter, Shuppet, and Duskull, cowering behind a barrel, scared. There was also a second Duskull too. Seeing all these Pokemon made Team Rocket realize that the huge Haunter was actually just an illusion created by all these other ghost Pokemon combining and using their powers, and Team Rocket got angry at this, with Meowth threatening to use Fury Swipes on them, and demanding to know why the fuck the ghost Pokemon would put on a scary illusion like that, as a second Ghastly appeared as well. The ghost Pokemon begged Team Rocket to hear them out, saying they could explain everything. So they start to explain, and Meowth translates, simply saying that the ghost Pokemon had a tough time. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they were all sleeping soundly inside of their sleeping bags, with Ash snoring extremely loudly, although May was actually still awake because she was still terrified, and the fear was keeping her awake, as well as her just envisioning the ghost that they had seen earlier. Just the thought of being in an abandoned town didn't calm her down either. Suddenly, though, May only got more freaked out when she heard the sound of some mysterious music being played by various instruments, it sounded like. As the sound of this music got louder and louder and louder and louder, May started to wonder if the town really was abandoned after all, and quickly crawled over to Ash, trying to wake him up. And funnily enough, she manages to wake Pikachu up when she shakes Ash, but not Ash himself. So Pikachu joins in and tries to wake up Ash too, but he couldn't. So May tried again, but Ash still slept, muttering something in his sleep about eating, making May annoyed as she shouted at Ash, and this was able to wake up not only Ash, but also Brock and Max. So Ash and the gang were all annoyed now, with Max very annoyed to have been woken up, and he asks why May had to wake them all up in the middle of the night. Just then, though, Brock was the first one who also heard the sound of the music, and pointed it out to Max and Ash, and so they heard it as well, with Max shocked that he was hearing music when they were supposed to be in a ghost town, so no one should have been able to play the music. As for Ash, he was admittedly scared of the sound, but he pridefully gritted his teeth and suggested that he and the gang try and find the source of the music, and the rest of the gang reluctantly agreed as they started walking through the cold and dark hallways of the abandoned building. And soon enough, the door that led to the room where the sound of the music was coming from was found. So Ash and the gang opened the door, and they peeked inside, not taking a full step in until they knew what was in there, and they saw several Pokemon in there, which were Kirlia, Ralts, Alakazam, Kadabra, Drowsy, Hypno, and Abra. Ralts and Kirlia were dancing on top of a table where the music was coming from, specifically from a phonograph on the table, while the other Pokemon watched the two dance and danced as best they could on the floor. All the Pokemon truly were amazed at each other's dancing skills and the sweet softness of the music being played on the phonograph. Well, all the Pokemon were amazed, aside from an Abra, who was sleeping, having some kind of force field around it. Ash suggested that the reason why Abra was probably sleeping inside of the force field was because it was tired from all the fun dancing it was probably doing before. Brock wasn't just interested in the Abra, he was interested in all of the psychic Pokemon, amazed at how this many Pokemon of one type had gathered together. While Ash, Max, and Brock were simply just having fun observing the psychic Pokemon dancing from where they were, May claimed that she could barely see and needed to get a better look. So she crawled over in front of Ash and Max, which caused Ash and Max to fall due to the sudden weight on their back, and May fell as well. And not only that, but they stumbled fully into the room and alerted all the psychic Pokemon to their presence. All the Pokemon didn't want to fight though, they instead were terrified and ran out of the room, aside from Abra, who was still asleep. Ash was wondering what caused this protective green bubble that Abra was in the first place, this weird force field. So he tried to touch it to find out more about it, but he stepped back in surprise as the force field hurt his hand when he touched it. Ash was disappointed that he got no clues as to what it was. Ash held his hand in pain. Brock came to the conclusion that Abra could have been using the move Safeguard to protect itself, and absorb the sound of the music and the dancing to make sure it wouldn't get woken up. Max then noticed that there was a picture underneath the couch that Abra was laying down on, and he picks it up to take a closer look at it and show it to Ash and the gang. And when they all examined it, they saw that the picture depicted all the psychic Pokemon with their trainers, who were miners, leading Brock to come to the conclusion that the psychic Pokemon must have helped the miners with the actual mining, and he envisioned the psychic Pokemon helping out, saying that their strong psychic abilities would be enough to move large rocks that would take days of human work to mine through. Ash was confused as to why the psychic Pokemon were currently here and not with their trainers, the miners. As if the Abra could hear Ash's question, the force field surrounding Abra started to shine with a multicolored light, and then a psychic image of the past started to show, leading Brock to come to the conclusion that Abra was showing Ash and the gang what happened in the past and why they were no longer with the miners. The flashback involves some boys and some men standing on a truck telling a group of psychic Pokemon, the ones that Ash and the gang had encountered, that they had to leave the town and that the Pokemon had to stay. Basically, all the townspeople, including the miners, had chosen to abandon the town for some reason, and they apparently didn't have enough space to take all of the psychic Pokemon with them, since they didn't catch them, because they didn't want to make them their own Pokemon, I guess. Maybe they weren't even their trainers, they were just their friends or something, I don't know. But the point was, the people didn't take the psychic Pokemon with them, abandoning them. The Abra that was currently having this flashback, which was its dream while it was sleeping, remembered how it tried to run after its trainer, a young boy, but the Abra couldn't catch up, and started to cry as the truck disappeared into the distance, and Abra cried for hours on end, blowing up dust in the process because of the force of its fall when it fell to the ground. Back in real life, we see that the Abra that was sleeping was currently crying as it dreamt about this, remembering its sad past. May, seeing how sad the Abra was, came to the conclusion that all the other Pokemon were likely experiencing a similar sadness and had been trying to cheer themselves up by dancing to the music after feeling lonely. Ash then suggested that they should give the psychic Pokemon their own little party to cheer them up, and the rest of the gang agreed, deciding to use the music to cheer the Pokemon up. So, without further ado, Ash and the gang get to work decorating the room for a party, decorating it with new lights that worked well, or rather the same lights, but Brock was just able to fix them, and there was also a table spread with Pokemon food all over top of the table. May then calls out to the scared psychic Pokemon that had run away further into the building and invites them to the party, with Brock shouting that there was some delicious Pokemon food for them to enjoy that he had personally made, and Max starts the music up. Hearing the music, the psychic Pokemon come into the room and start to party, dancing and enjoying the food. Kadabra and Ralts come in first, followed by all the other psychic types, and Ash and the gang of Pikachu were very happy to see all the Pokemon enjoying themselves and dancing around. Pikachu was especially pleased, because, it was a fellow Pokemon, and it just smiled happily at the beautiful party. Meanwhile, back with Team Rocket, they were still sitting in the mine, listening to the Ghost Pokemon story, as Meowth translated. Basically, according to their story, it seemed as though the Ghost Pokemon used to live in the mine very peacefully, and would always have fun together, but then the miners came and turned the mine into an area that was just used for mining gold, not a peaceful area anymore. The miners eventually left, as we knew though, so the Ghost Mons thought that all their trouble was over, but they realized that the miners' psychic Pokemon were abandoned and partied very loudly in the mine. Not the abandoned building like they currently were doing, and they were actually partying in the abandoned building now because of the Ghost Pokemon's intervention, because they couldn't stand all the partying eventually, so they combined into the figure of the gigantic Haunter in order to scare all the psychic Pokemon away, so they would no longer sing and dance in the mine, so that the Ghost Pokemon could live in peace. But as a result, this started a massive feud between the Ghost and Psychic Pokemon, who had been bickering with each other ever since. And sometimes, the Psychic Pokemon would even try and come to the mine again to get revenge on the Ghost Pokemon, only to be scared away back to their new abandoned building. Upon hearing the Ghost Pokemon story, Jessie starts to rub her chin, coming up with a plan, as she whispers it to James and Meowth after calling them close to her. Basically, her plan was to help out the Ghost Pokemon, to get revenge on the Psychic Pokemon, and that way, Team Rocket could capture the Psychic Pokemon for themselves. and they could sell some of these psychic Pokemon for a good price since they were so powerful, but they could also use the psychic Pokemon to help them mine for some more gold so that they could sell the gold as well, knowing that the psychic Pokemon were used by the miners. James smiled at the idea of manipulating the ghost Pokemon to help Team Rocket out. Man, sick bastard. And Meowth excitedly tells all the ghost Pokemon that Team Rocket was going to help them in their fight against the psychic Pokemon. Jesse and James assure the ghost Pokemon of this as well. The next morning, we then cut to Wobbuffet, who was still running, scared as fuck from the huge haunter it saw earlier, scared only at the thought of it still. Just then, though, Wobbuffet came across the house where the party with the psychic Pokemon and Ash and the gang was going on, and noticed the party going on once it saw a light in the window, indicating that people or Pokemon were in there. So we walked over to it. Once Wobbuffet got close enough to the house, it heard the music playing, and also saw the Curlia dancing on a table, and Wobbuffet immediately fell in love with Curlia, to the point where its heart was almost bursting through its mouth for some reason. Wobbuffet instantly became motivated to do something to impress Curlia, and instantly walked into the house through the front door after picking up a flower outside, determined to give it to Curlia, and since the door was hanging from its hinges, the entire room shook, which made all of the psychic Pokemon, including Curlia, as well as Ash and the gang, immediately look at Wobbuffet in surprise to see it, and Max came to the conclusion that this had to have been Team Rocket's Wobbuffet, and Team Rocket must have been nearby. Regardless of this, Wobbuffet nervously steps towards Curlia and gives it the flower it picked up. Curlia was very happy to accept the flower that Wobbuffet gave to it, which in turn makes Wobbuffet almost as happy as Curlia, who just received the flower. Because while Curlia was only just smiling happily, Wobbuffet was fucking dancing in happiness. As for May, she was very impressed with the fact that Wobbuffet actually had feelings, and commented that if she received a flower like that, she would really appreciate it, so she totally understood Curlia's happiness to get to receive it. Just then, though, this romantic moment between Wobbuffet and Curlia was interrupted when a large earthquake shakes the entire room, causing everybody to fall back in shock at the power of the earthquake. Wobbuffet holds on to Curlia for dear life to protect it, as Brock comes to the conclusion that an earthquake of that magnitude was probably caused by an explosion, so Ash and the gang hurriedly rush out to go investigate the source of the earthquake, and they come face to face with the gigantic haunter, which looked bigger than ever. Likely because maybe the gas leak from the mine wasn't part of the haunter originally, but anyways, the giant haunter laughs as Ash and the gang back away in fear, along with all the psychic Pokemon, and Wobbuffet let her also join them outside, but just then, two large robotic hands emerge from the haunter's mouth and grab several of the psychic Pokemon, much to Ash and the gang's shock, as the psychic Pokemon are put inside the haunter's mouth when the mechanical arms retreat. This left only Pikachu, Curlia, and Wobbuffet uncaptured. But the haunter wasn't done yet, as the mechanical arms emerged once again and knocked Wobbuffet out of the way and grabbed both Curlia and Pikachu. Wobbuffet, even though it wasn't captured, hated seeing Curlia being captured and heroically jumped towards the haunter to save Curlia and ended up diving straight into the haunter's mouth to do so. This caused a voice sounding like Jesse's to scream from inside the haunter, mad at Wobbuffet for sabotaging Team Rocket's plan. The haunter's face was moving weirdly as the voice that sounded like Jesse's was talking, and it appears as though something was happening inside of the haunter as the entire body of haunter started to move, and just then the haunter fades away, and a huge Team Rocket mech appears in its place, with several of the ghost Pokemon that had formed the haunter sitting on top of the mech. The transformation from the haunter to the mech caused some smoke to arise, so Ash and the gang had to protect themselves from the smoke, but once the smoke dissipated, Ash and the gang noted how the ghost Pokemon must have created the illusion of the huge haunter, and also the mech kind of looked like a monster. To no one's surprise, Team Rocket then revealed themselves, standing beside the ghost Pokemon as they came out of their mech. Yeah, this was their mech, to no one's surprise, and they immediately did a motto with the theme of a ghost, with both Wobbuffet and Chimecho joining in on the motto. Even though Wobbuffet was currently in one of the mech's arms at this point, because after going inside of the mouth, and now the haunter was gone, and it was just a mech, Wobbuffet was therefore now in an arm instead of the haunter's mouth. Wobbuffet then spots that it was the only Pokemon in one of the mech's arms, because Team Rocket actually didn't want to capture Wobbuffet, obviously, since it was their own Pokemon. All the psychic Pokemon, including Curlia, and with the exception of Abra, since it was still just sleeping inside the building, were actually trapped inside of a cage that had deployed out of the mech. So Wobbuffet desperately breaks out of the arm's grasp after some struggling, and jumps down to the cell, holding all the psychic Pokemon. And Pikachu, though Wobbuffet was only desperate to save Curlia. Ash and the gang demanded that Team Rocket release all the Pokemon, but Team Rocket just laughed, bragging that their mech was immune to both electric and psychic attacks, and this meant that Ash and the gang couldn't do anything about their mech, and Meowth bragged that soon they would be giving Pikachu over to their boss. May then questioned why the ghost Pokemon were allied with Team Rocket, and why the psychic Pokemon were captured if Team Rocket only decided to take Pikachu to their boss. Although Meowth clarified, starting to fake cry along with Jesse and James, that they had decided to help out the ghost Pokemon, saying that the ghosts only wanted peace and quiet, but the psychic Pokemon ruined this by just playing music and dancing and partying all the time. Ash and the gang were able to identify Team Rocket's fake cry from 100 miles away, though, so they came to the conclusion that Team Rocket must have just manipulated the ghost Pokemon to work with them somehow. Ash and the gang's thoughts and Team Rocket's crime was interrupted, though, when They all heard Wobbuffet desperately trying to release Curlia, and in the process, the rest of the psychic Pokemon Pikachu by banging on the cage's bar with its fist as Jesse, James, and Meowth screamed at Wobbuffet to stop. Wobbuffet didn't though, and seeing that slamming against the cage's bars with his fist was useless, Wobbuffet took several steps back and charges towards the cage, smashing it with his head. This failed as well, so Wobbuffet took a few steps backward again, stared at Curlia to give him motivation, and desperately tried once again to break the bars with his head, actually being successful this time. But since Wobbuffet wasn't used to attacking, the force of it attacking the bars with his head caused Wobbuffet to bounce back and fall on the ground, right as Pikachu and all the psychic Pokemon run out of the cage, running over Wobbuffet in the process, happy to be free. Much to Wobbuffet's delight, however, Curlia stayed behind to show its appreciation to Wobbuffet for saving it, and Curlia was worried about Wobbuffet, seeing that Wobbuffet was knocked down, but since Wobbuffet was so happy to see Curlia, it actually managed to get up without any issues, which made Curlia smile in relief. As for Team Rocket, they were immensely shocked and angry at the fact that the psychic Pokemon and Pikachu were released because of Jesse's own Wobbuffet, no less, and as Jesse scolded Wobbuffet for this, Meowth told all the ghost Pokemon to attack with a combined Shadow Ball at the fleeing psychic types and Pikachu in an attempt to injure them so Team Rocket could capture them again. Just before the Shadow Ball hit Pikachu and the other psychic Pokemon, though, Curlia took action, jumping into the air in front of Pikachu and the psychic Pokemon, and she protected them by using a Reflect attack, getting a huge flash of light as the huge Shadow Ball connected with the Reflect. Curlia was having trouble keeping the Reflect up, literally sweating because of the force of the Shadow Ball against it, but Curlia was able to build up enough power to use the Reflect to reflect the big Shadow Ball right back at Team Rocket, causing their map to explode and sending Team Rocket blasting off, including Wobbuffet, because he happened to get caught in the blast, unfortunately. Action Gang and Pikachu and the psychic Pokemon commend Curlia for using such a powerful Reflect attack and celebrate the fact that Team Rocket was gone, as Curlia stands up, recovering from the powerful attack, before noticing Wobbuffet's now wilted flower on the ground that it gave to Curlia, implying that Curlia must have dropped it during the attack. Curlia picks it up and holds it close to her, feeling bad that Wobbuffet was blasted off as well. Just then, though, Curlia's thoughts were interrupted as the ghost and psychic Pokemon got on opposite sides of one another, determined to fight, since they were still angry at each other after all this. Ash demanded the ghost and psychic Pokemon to not fight, but both types just ignored him and ran at each other, about to make contact. So Ash intervenes, telling Pikachu to use Thunderbolt on the ground between the ghost and psychic Pokemon, which stopped them from fighting because they were so shocked by this. Ash and the gang take the opportunity to jump in the spot between the ghost and psychic Pokemon with Pikachu, and all put their arms out, trying to convince the two groups to not fight, but the two groups were still angry at one another. However, Brock then gets an idea when he looks inside the window of the abandoned house and sees Abra still sleeping in its safeguard bubble, and excitedly developed a plan, remembering that Abra's safeguard was soundproof. The next day, when the sun had risen, the psychic Pokemon were partying again, with loud music coming from the phonograph, but the ghost Pokemon, nor Ash and the gang, could not hear the music because all the psychic Pokemon were essentially inside of the safeguard bubble that Abra had created. Basically, since the safeguard was soundproof, only things that were inside the safeguard could hear what was inside the safeguard, not anything out of it. So if the psychic Pokemon just went inside Abra's safeguard, then only they could hear the loud music, not the ghost Pokemon. So therefore, the ghost Pokemon were no longer annoyed and were able to live in peace with the psychic Pokemon outside of the safeguard. Now, you may be wondering, how the fuck there was a safeguard bubble big enough to fit all the psychic Pokemon? Well, the psychic Pokemon were able to wake Abra up and basically tell it to make a bigger safeguard bubble, and once it did, Abra went back to sleep and now started to wear earmuffs so it itself wouldn't hear any of the music while it was inside the safeguard with the psychic types, which it had to be since it was the source of the safeguard. The episode then ends with May, Ash, and Max all commending Brock for his great idea, and the ghost Pokemon agreed, commending Brock as well by circling him. With that, Ash and gang take one last look at the happy ghost-type Pokemon who were hanging out outside of the safeguard bubble, and they took one last look at the psychic Pokemon inside of the safeguard bubble, and then they left the town, continuing their journey to Ash's second Battle Frontier facility, the Battle Arena. And we also see a wide view of the entire town.